The controller market has changed a lot over the last 2 years, and I bet you didn't realize that you can actually buy a $20 Switch controller and completely replace your DualSense. You see, with adapters like these, you can use, well, any controller anywhere. Now, why would you want to do that exactly? Circularity, how accurate your sticks create a circle. Pulling rate, your controller's refresh rate, which matches with latency. Hall effect sticks, prevents you from ever having stick drift. Back buttons, allows you to jump without your thumbs ever leaving the sticks. And cost, did you know that on average PlayStation controllers cost the most? But not everybody wants to buy an adapter and a controller, so of course there's going to be controllers on this list for every device. I will say after researching over 100 different controllers, Switch definitely has the best options overall, especially for PC. And if you're curious on the specifics about every controller, or just want to know what some of the terms mean in detail, I put the downloads for the spreadsheet and the terms list, as well as a doc with every purchase link and some products to go along with them. These also go on sale a lot, so keep that in mind when seeing prices. Also make sure your controller has firmware on PC, so you'll be playing on the best version of your controller. Anyways, enough nonsense, let's get into it. We're kicking it off strong here with the Gamesir Cyclone 2. This thing's been pretty popular on PC lately because it's really good for the cost. It uses TMR sticks, which are an upgraded version of Hall effect. It does not have removable sticks, which we'll get to see in some controllers later. Everything besides the bumpers are mechanical, which is a more durable and arguably better sounding alternative to the membrane switches like on the Xbox Series controllers. They also have trigger stops, which has been more popular lately from Gamesir, which is a nice decision to add to their newer gamepads. That's one of the things I disliked about the G7 SE, which is their most popular controller right now. This controller also has software that lets you edit a lot of things like the RGB, custom dead zones and curves, remap buttons, all that good stuff. You can also spend an extra $6 for a charging dock to go with it, which in my opinion is pretty worth it. A good alternative to the Cyclone 2 is the EasySMX D10. They're pretty similar, with the main difference just being aesthetics. The D10, however, does have a better battery but slightly worse circularity, which really isn't that noticeable. Whatever your priorities are, both of these are great choices if you like the shape of Xbox controllers. Now, for a cheaper price, you could get the Gamesir Nova 2 Lite. Yes, you'll be hearing this brand a lot in this video. This controller packs a really good punch for the price, as it's pretty much the more budget version of the previous two. It's also very new, which on one hand is good because you know they don't use outdated parts. On the other hand, there aren't really a lot of reviews yet, so you don't know if there's problems with it, but since Gamesir is pretty consistent with their products, I wouldn't worry too much about it. So yeah, $30 controller that's better than the Elite Series 2. That's pretty crazy. For my PlayStation fans out there, here's one that truly represents the future of controller gaming. This is the Tarantula Pro, and holy fuck, this thing has 9 extra buttons. I don't know why you would ever need 9 buttons, but it's a pretty crazy concept. This monster also has TMR sticks, 1200 mAh battery, which is the second biggest on this list, another $10 charging dock bundle, and it's just great for claw and regular since you can claw those extra buttons if you want. The craziest part is you can rotate the buttons to switch layout if you like. Like, what the hell am I even looking at right now? Absolute banger. So if you do want a controller like this, but you don't care about the trigger stops or the features that make you look like a madman, try the Tegenaria Lite. It's also a pretty recent one, except there's few reviews on it, and it's pretty much just your standard PlayStation controller, but with Hall effect and back buttons. Can't really complain about this one since it's the cheapest symmetrical stick controller on this list. It is wired, but I don't really think that's a big deal considering the latency is 4 times better than the Dualsense. Alright, so it obviously wouldn't be a Switch list without a pair of Joy-Cons. So these are the Aolion J20 Joy-Cons, and they're low-key the only Joy-Cons that I would use unironically if I owned them. They're actually like really good. Every button's mechanical, it has back buttons, and it's not flat like the regular ones, so you can actually hold it without wanting to quit gaming forever. And of course, they're half the price and never drift. Kind of a no-brainer. Up next is a well-known and respected brand called 8-Bit Do, and we'll start off with the Ultimate 2C. Now, you gotta make sure you get the Bluetooth version if you want it to work on Switch, since they make the most confusing titles for whatever reason. This controller is really good for the cost if you can adapt to the ergonomics, since it's pretty unique. It does everything you need it to really, and it has 2 buttons on the top, none on the back, but some people prefer it like that anyways. It does have an 8% circularity, so if you're used to high circularity, this is a solid one for you. But there isn't any software, so you can't edit anything digitally. And most important part, do not use raw input mode. You'll get drift if you do this, trust me, I tried it. Just suck it up and deal with the small dead zones. There's also the Ultimate 2, which is a much better version of the 2C, but for double the price. Again, make sure you get the Bluetooth version for Switch compatibility, and don't use raw input for the sticks. The biggest difference is that the Ultimate 2 has software for PC, meaning you can edit the dead zones to your liking, and it also has 2 back buttons and trigger stops. The sticks and battery are also better, so in my opinion the 2C is good, but the extra money is worth it for the 2. Another controller from ANBERNIC called the RGP01 is just a cheaper version of the 8BitDo controllers, but they're really not even bad. This is the cheapest controller on this list, but it somehow has 0% circularity and back buttons, but obviously that comes at a cost. It's only 125 Hz. Editor Braille here, I was wrong about the polling rate. It's actually only 200 over dongle, but it's 1000 over cable, so this thing is literally just better than the 2C in almost every way. Now, returning to the top competitors, we've got the Flydigi Vader 4 Pro, which is most people's #1 pick for budget pro controllers, and for good reason. Removable sticks, mechanical face buttons and D-pad, 6 extra buttons. Yes, this controller has remappable face buttons. It also is the only controller with a knob around the joysticks that lets you adjust the tension or how loose the sticks feel. Lots of great reviews on this one, so I consider this one of the best choices out there. Next up is a pretty cool gimmick controller from NYXI called the Flexi. The design is something you do or don't like, since this one definitely stands out. It's the only controller with an open shell design, kind of like the Model O. It doesn't really perform as well as some of the other options, but the thing that makes this one stand out is you can move the sticks to be whatever position you want, making it the cheapest controller out there with this feature. You've probably seen this idea from the Victrix Pro, which is not on this list since it's $200 and doesn't have Hall effect sticks included. Disappointing. Anyways, it's a pretty good controller if you like using both layouts, or a second controller for a friend playing at your house. Another really cool gimmick controller ahead of its time is the Manba One V2, and it has all the features you need as well as the biggest battery on this list. Compared to the V1 version on Amazon, the V2 is way better, so don't buy the V1. So obviously we have to talk about the screen since it's the clear hook for this thing. You can open the software directly from the controller and edit your profiles, which is so sick. Goodbye if you want to impress people. You wouldn't think it's only $70 too. But I know that one's a bit expensive for most of you, so here's probably the most underrated controller on the entire list. This is the EOS Pro 2 from Fantech, and it's incredibly feature packed for the price. It has an abnormally wide design, but it doesn't really affect the comfort. So for $40, you get TMR removable sticks, mechanical face buttons and D-pad, trigger stops, back buttons, everything you need really. If you're willing to buy from their official website, this is a really good choice out there. They also have a controller that I couldn't find any reviews on, but it seems pretty promising. Revolver 3. It's a Switch controller with a Dualsense style build this time. Doesn't have any special features besides back buttons, but that's because it's only 25 bucks. I would pick this over the regular Dualsense for PC gaming for a few reasons. So 1, the price obviously. 2, the dongle is easier and better to connect versus Bluetooth. 3, it's Hall effect, no brainer. 4, there's software so you can edit stuff for your liking. 5, back buttons, and 6, it registers X input on PC, which has better compatibility versus D input or PlayStation's. So if you're willing to try this one out without seeing reviews, this is a great option. Alright, so this next one is a beast because it's the most responsive controller in the world. Allow me to present the PXN P5 8K. It has 8,000 Hz polling rate, which is 4 times as fast as the second fastest on this list. That is about 1/10 of a millisecond. And I will say, it's pretty doubtful that you would even notice anything higher than 1,000, but it's still a really cool concept. They're bold enough to make their own type of joystick technology as well. My only gripe is that there isn't any software yet. I was also wrong about this. There's an app for mobile only, not PC. Does everything you need, pretty basic. 4 back buttons and trigger stops make this thing definitely worth a shot. Finally, the last one for Switch, and it's my personal favorite out of all of them that I've tested. This is the BIGBIG WON Blitz 2, and to me it's the near perfect controller. This is the most comfortable controller that I've ever used. The shell, the rubber grips, and the sticks just make this thing perfect. Every single button's mechanical, and the triggers have no full range option, but it was originally a downside for me, but I got used to it super fast and actually prefer this over the micro switch trigger stops. The only 2 things you could really complain about is the lack of 4 back buttons and the circularity not being perfect, but this thing was made for shooter games in mind. It doesn't really matter to me. Super underrated brand. I know the Blitz 3 is going to be my top pick over every controller on this list easily. Just a warning that I'm not including all the $200 premium controllers since nobody can afford those anymore. They all do the same thing. There's two on here that are pretty expensive, but in my opinion, they're the best PS5 controllers right now for the price. So if you play PlayStation, you know that most third-party options are pretty inferior to the DualShock 4 and DualSense, which is why they're actually my first picks. But Braille, you said every controller on here was Hall effect. Wait, now normally I don't recommend buying refurbished or used controllers, but these are actually way better if you buy used and you look in the right spots. So if you go to eBay, search Hall effect or TMR, DualShock 4 or DualSense, chances are you'll find some cheaper than the retail price. Just a great choice if you're used to the PlayStation controllers already and you don't feel like trying a new one. The next three controllers are all for PS4 since there's barely anything budget for PS5 yet. They will work on PS5 titles if you use an adapter like the black pill, so keep that in mind. This is the Fantech Nova Pro, and the part that scares people away from this product is the design, obviously. It is a shell of an Xbox controller, but it also feels kind of like a DualSense because of the stick symmetry. If you could deal with that, it's actually a really good gamepad for the price. A PS4 controller with back buttons, trigger stops, and removable sticks for $50 is unheard of. And hey, apparently they're working on PS5 controllers, so keep an eye out for that. A more popular alternative is the QRD Spark N5, which in my opinion is inferior to the Nova Pro. The latency is a bit higher and there aren't any trigger stops. The battery is stronger, however, and the grips are slightly more angled, which may be a better option for you. It's really just a decent budget controller for PS4. So for this next one I couldn't find any reviews for, but I've tested it myself, and I'll just say in terms of quality, this is NYXI's unnamed PS4 controller, and I don't really think it's that much better than Sony's. However, it's a gamepad with zero dead zone and similar circularity for $30, so of course I'll mention it. It also has two back buttons and clicky bumpers, yet the bumpers are one of the few things that I have to complain about this controller. I like how they sound, but they're a bit hard to press out of the box and have no travel. Once you break it in a bit, it's not that bad. It also unfortunately has a pretty underperforming pulling rate, but to be honest, I didn't really notice any latency when playing on PC. I think this is a good controller if you're on a budget and you don't want to deal with drift. So speaking of hundreds of random Amazon brands that all look the same, this is the only one that might actually be worth it. This is another unnamed PS5 gamepad from IWGAME. What makes this one special? You can use a PS4 shaped controller on PS5 games. It uses an adapter similar to the black pill to use it on PS5 properly, which is of course the reason it has bad reviews. Nobody knows how to use instructions. Because it's a random brand from Amazon, there's basically no reviews on this thing besides this guy. Thanks, man. This company also has pretty good customer service apparently, so if it had any problems or just flat out sucks, you could probably get a refund easily. Just remember that you have to use the adapter for it to show up as a DualSense. Alright, so now that the budget controllers are out of the way, let's triple the cost and introduce Beaver Customs. This is one of the companies that lets you fully customize your controller. If having a completely unique controller is important to you, then by all means, this is the brand for you. They also make some for Xbox and PS4 if that's what you prefer. It's also pretty fun to just go on the website and design your own controller just to see the costs. If you do want to purchase one of these, make sure you get the Magneto option since you have the TMR sticks. The price increase is worth it for this type of controller, I promise you. An alternative that I personally prefer is the HEXGAMING Rival Pro. So there's also the Hex Phantom, which is arguably better because of their having a trigger stop switch and better back button placement, but considering it's $230 at starting price, the Rival Pro is what I pick any day of the month. There's also the standard Rival for $10 cheaper, which the only difference is there being 2 back buttons instead of 4. There's also a builder for this one, and I think it's better than Beaver's due to the fact that pretty much every change does not affect the price. Seeing that it's no cost extra to add the clicky triggers and buttons are very impressive. HEXGAMING Rival Pro, best PlayStation controller out there for the price in my opinion. Now obviously following the same trend as the PlayStation list, you can buy an upgraded Xbox Series controller on eBay as well. The advantage of this obviously, you get to play wireless for cheap. The only problem is that they're 125Hz compared to the DualSense's 250Hz. This seems like a pretty big disadvantage, however, the Xbox controller stays charged for longer because of this, and the delay isn't really noticeable. Just make sure you buy a reusable battery pack since nobody likes to keep buying batteries. If you don't care about playing wireless, the Gamesir T7 is a pretty solid choice for the price. It doesn't have any special features except it has better latency than Xbox controllers, and it costs less. Basically just your generic Xbox controller with Hall effect. An upgraded version of the T7 is of course the T7 Pro. For $20 more, you can get back buttons, trigger stops, and some of the cool lighting on the shell wherever you input. This thing isn't close to as good as the Cyclone 2, but it's a pretty solid choice for Xbox. The more popular Xbox controller from Gamesir, the G7 SE, in my opinion, is not as good as this thing because they're the same price and it has less features, yet the same performance. Plus, there's a way better version of the G7, the G7 Pro. Originally, I thought this controller wasn't really worth the extra cost, but it's the only Xbox controller with wireless support for PC, removable TMR sticks, and rubber grips I could find. If it had 4 back buttons, this would have destroyed the other comp, and it also just came out, but the hype around this release of the controller meant there was already going to be a lot of reviews for it. I would say for most people wanting a high quality Pro controller for Xbox, this is the best choice out there. Next gamepad is the Snakebite Pro X. And this is probably one of the least known brands on this list since I literally just found this thing by scrolling on Amazon. It has a Dualsense style D-pad except more clicky, and it has larger joysticks than most controllers. Biggest disadvantage of the Pro X compared to the T7 Pro is the lack of software, but that was made intentionally as seen by the system of the back buttons. Pretty underrated controller. Now, it's time to talk about the beast, the monster, the Wolverine V3. Tournament Edition. This is the only controller on this list that has a wireless version, but it comes at a cost, so it's a pass in my book. Before I started making this video 2 months ago, I never even considered this thing since I just assumed it was another overpriced controller, but oh boy, was I way off on that. This controller has 6 extra buttons, 4 back, 2 top, and it's fully mechanical, has 1000 Hz on PC. The circularity is pretty high, but it can be tweaked in their software. In some ways, this is better than the G7 Pro. The other controller that's almost on par with the Wolverine is the Scuff Valor Pro. It's their first Hall Effect gamepad and also their cheapest. Honestly, I wouldn't consider the Valor Pro to be as overrated as their other controllers, except it kind of is. It has 1000 Hz on PC as well, but at that point just pick up a Switch controller for PC instead. The paddle placement may be something you prefer, but there's one thing that turns people away from this controller. There's no software. Who cares, right? Scuff controllers are already good out of the box. Right, Scuff, you're on the right track, but maybe next time let's add some joystick customization. 8-Bit Do, welcome back. Of course the 8-Bit Do Ultimate was so good they had to make an Xbox version. Once again, I really do need to mention this again. Do not use raw dead zone mode, you will get drift. Only problem is the 10% circularity that can't be changed in the software, but hey, you may actually prefer it. Another really popular controller from 8-Bit Do is the Pro 2, and there isn't really anything too special about it besides the fact that it's the only symmetrical stick Xbox controller on the market right now. This might actually be the first Hall Effect controller I've discovered, and it holds up pretty well considering it's almost 4 years old now. So the next 2 controllers are honestly not made for competitive gaming, but they're definitely worth mentioning for you nostalgia heads out there. Hyperkin brought back the original Xbox 360 controller with the Xenon, and it's better than ever, having way better sticks and buttons than the original 360 controller. If you're a big fan of Xbox 360 or just like the nostalgia, pick this one up. They also created the Duchess, which is a recreation of the even older original Xbox controller. If you couldn't tell, this is the largest controller on this list, and the triggers sit lower down, which is honestly pretty comfortable from experience. The original doesn't have bumpers for some reason, which is why these buttons and the obvious inspiration of the Vader 4 Pro, so the Duchess added bumpers, so you have both options. No, you cannot remap the black and white button sadly, but these are great controllers. I don't recommend them for modern gaming, but of course, no special features, great for retro. Now don't think I forgot about you mobile legends out there, so I picked some out for y'all too. Honestly, I was pretty surprised looking through some of these. I was expecting mobile to have some disappointing choices since everybody just uses Xbox and PS5 controllers, but I was wrong. I also changed a lot of the research points for mobile to be more focused on compatibility, since there really isn't a lot of info about the joysticks. Plus, all of the controllers are good anyways. Kicking it off strong, we of course have the Gamesir controller, the G8 Galileo. I will say, I do not think this is the best controller on this list, but it's definitely one of the more popular mobile controllers out there right now, so it deserves its spot. It's a pretty standard controller, it has solid ergonomics, it does have the shortest length for holding devices, so this really isn't good for you tablet players out there. There's only an app for Android, which goes for the NYXI Gamesir controller. Speaking of which, the X5 Lite, basically just a smaller version of the G8 Galileo with no range triggers. Pretty solid, no back buttons or anything, just meant to be a good budget mobile controller. Cheapest one on the list. Next up is the Absolute S9, and this is probably the most underrated mobile controller and also the best apparently.
I do believe this is currently the best telescopic controller on the market.
It's basically just a slightly better version of the Galileo with an Apple app. Not too much to say about it since we've already covered what pretty much every controller feature is, so I'll just move on. To put it simply, buy this one if you take mobile serious enough. Alright, so it was pretty challenging to find symmetrical stick controllers, especially for mobile, which is why I had to include at least one on here. So this is the BSP D9, and it's pretty much just a Dualsense for mobile, except with Hall effect sticks and back buttons of course. The build quality is not as premium as the Dualsense because it's only $40, but definitely does not feel bad. The only thing I don't like about this controller is that it's Bluetooth only, but at the same time this means you could hold your Switch and maybe some non-USB-C devices. Their other controller, which is more unique, the D10S. So there's also the regular D10, but it doesn't have the feature that makes this controller stand out, which is the cooling pad to prevent your phone from overheating for like $10 extra, so I'd say that's worth the extra charge. Alright, so before I give you my top 10 personal picks, here's a quick honorable mentions list since these controllers deserve to be mentioned. So that's every controller that I would genuinely recommend if you're on the market for a new one, especially if you get stick drift or if you just want to try a pro controller or just save money. Now my top picks are obviously going to have some bias since it's going to be different for everyone, and I haven't tested 90% of these controllers, but based off of the 2 months of research I spent for this video, here's my top 10 picks out of order. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Please share this to all of your friends so they don't waste $80 on a controller that barely has any features. If you have any questions for me, feel free to comment. Again, comment your favorite controller on this list and the comment with the most likes I will buy. If this video blows up somehow, I'll make more content like this because I somehow enjoyed making this video. Thank you for watching, y'all.